My name is Diana Chen, and the night my husband's mistress discovered who I really was the night I understood something I should have faced much earlier. A marriage can die quietly long before anyone files papers. Sometimes it dies in crowded rooms, under warm golden lights, with music playing too loudly and strangers laughing into champagne glasses, while the woman beside your husband still believes she's the smartest person in the room. I didn't know my life was about to split in two when I walked into TechStream's annual party that evening. My husband, Daniel Chen, had insisted I come. "It'll be good for you," he had said in that careful, practiced tone he'd started using with me over the past few years, the one that sounded polite on the surface but carried distance underneath. What he really meant was simpler. He needed me there so people would see the ring on my finger, the marriage still technically intact, the image still polished. So I went. The party was held in the downtown building TechStream had been proudly showing off for 3 years. Exposed brick, massive windows, marble floors reflecting amber light. Every corner designed to look expensive without admitting it was trying. I stood near the edge of the room with a glass of whiskey I didn't want, watching my husband laugh too hard at Vanessa Reed's jokes, watching the way she touched his sleeve, the way he leaned toward her without realizing I was looking. Our children weren't there. Ryan was away for work, Claire was buried in finals, Tyler was still at college, and in a room full of Daniel's colleagues, investors, and friends, I had never felt more alone. Then it happened. I shifted my weight and my wallet slipped from my hand. It hit the marble with a sharp crack. My building access badge slid out and skated across the floor, right to Vanessa's heels. She bent to pick it up with a polite smile already forming on her face. Then she looked down and froze. I watched the color drain from her expression as her eyes locked onto the text. D. Chen, Sentinel Holdings, owner, access. Her fingers started trembling. Slowly, she lifted her gaze to mine, and for the first time that entire night, she looked at me not with pity, not with condescension, but with fear, real fear. "Mrs. Chen," she whispered, barely audible over the music. "Does your husband know who you are?" I took the badge from her shaking hand and slipped it back into my wallet. I did not smile. I did not raise my voice. I only held her stare and answered quietly, "He knows exactly who I am." Then I let the silence cut between us before adding, "The real question is, do you?" That was the moment the room stayed the same, but everything underneath it shifted. I was 52 years old when that night happened, and by then I had already lived enough life to know that betrayal rarely begins with one dramatic moment. It begins with small permissions, small silences, small dismissals you explain away because you are too tired, too loyal, or too invested in the life you built to admit something is rotting inside it. For most people, I was a quiet woman who had stepped away from the center of things. For Daniel, I had become even less than that, an afterthought. A fixture in the house, a woman whose presence was useful when it supported his image, and inconvenient when it threatened it. But that was never the whole truth of me. I had spent 12 years building DataCore, a data systems company that began in a cramped apartment office with one folding desk, 2 secondhand monitors, and a stubborn belief that architecture mattered more than hype. While other founders chased trends and flashy launches, I built frameworks that lasted. Infrastructure, systems, logic. The bones nobody applauded, but everybody depended on once the spotlight faded. Daniel had been there in the early years. That was part of what made everything hurt the way it did. We met when I was 26, and he was charming in a way that made people relax around him immediately. He was sharp, articulate, warm when he wanted to be, ambitious without seeming aggressive. He knew how to enter a room and make people feel seen. Back then, I mistook that talent for emotional depth. We met at a technology networking dinner through mutual friends. I still remember him standing beside me near a badly arranged cheese tray, making fun of the event's overused buzzwords. "If one more man says synergy tonight," he murmured, "I might fake a medical emergency just to leave." I laughed harder than I meant to. He looked at me with surprise, then with interest. "There," he said softly. that laugh. I was hoping you had one. That was how it started. He pursued me with steadiness, not intensity. Flowers once, never too often. Thoughtful messages. Long conversations over coffee that turned into dinners, then weekends, then a life. He admired my discipline. I admired his ease with people. He could talk his way through tension I preferred to solve with action. He softened the edges of me, or at least I believed he did. When we got married, I truly thought we were building something together. And in the beginning, maybe we were. We had Ryan first, then Claire, then Tyler. 3 children in 5 years. A blur of bottles, school forms, late-night fevers, business travel, mortgages, ballet recitals, soccer games, investor calls, family dinners, and the kind of exhaustion that makes a marriage either deepen or quietly split apart. For a long time, Daniel and I looked solid from the outside. He became the polished one, the socially gifted one, the husband who knew how to charm teachers, neighbors, clients, and family friends. I became the reliable center of gravity, the mother who remembered deadlines, the wife who could review contracts at midnight and still be up before dawn to pack lunches, the founder who sold her company at the right time, structured the assets correctly, and made sure our family would never have to worry again. 5 years before the party, I sold DataCore. Not because I had lost my mind for business, not because I was finished building, because I was tired. Tired in that deep cellular way that no vacation fixes. I had made more than enough money. I had protected the intellectual property, moved major holdings into entities no one around me paid much attention to, and placed the downtown building under Sentinel Holdings, a trust structure designed to keep ownership discreet and protected. Daniel knew pieces of it, not all of it. He had never cared much about legal architecture unless it affected his comfort directly. After the sale, I stepped back from public work. That was when something in him changed. At first, it was subtle. He started speaking about me in the past tense, even while I was sitting beside him. Diana used to be unstoppable. She was brilliant when she was in the thick of it. She's taking it easy now. Taking it easy. As if 12 brutal years of building a company had been some little phase I had outgrown. As if rest was irrelevance. I ignored it longer than I should have. Then, TechStream entered our lives. Daniel joined them first in an advisory capacity, then more seriously. He said it made him feel energized again. I didn't argue. I wanted him to have something that belonged to him, something that made him feel alive. I had no interest in controlling his career. That was never who I was. Then came Vanessa Reed. At first, she was just a name, a marketing executive, then a regular topic, then a presence that started appearing in photos, anecdotes, after-hours meetings, internal celebrations, industry panels. She's sharp, Daniel told me once while loosening his tie in our bedroom mirror. Actually understands positioning, which is rare. I was removing my earrings at the vanity. That sounds like admiration. He gave a small shrug. It's called respect, Diana. The answer itself wasn't offensive. The tone was. A month later, we attended a charity dinner together, and I saw Vanessa for the first time. Beautiful in a polished, camera-aware way. Confident. Younger than Daniel by at least 15 years. She greeted him with an ease that was too practiced to be innocent. "Daniel," she said, touching his forearm lightly, "you vanished before I could steal you for one more introduction." Then she turned to me with a bright smile. "And you must be Diana. I've heard so much about you." Women know. We know when another woman is being gracious, and we know when she is measuring the wife in front of her. I smiled back because humiliation never deserved the satisfaction of my reaction. "Only the edited version, I'm sure," I said. For one brief second, I saw something flicker in her face. Not guilt. Calculation. That should have been enough. It wasn't. Because by then, I had spent 26 years learning how to smooth tension for the sake of children, schedules, holidays, appearances, emotional survival. When you've been married that long, denial doesn't feel dramatic. It feels responsible. and Daniel's family only made that instinct worse. They had always liked me more when I was useful than when I was strong. His mother admired my composure, my cooking, my parenting, my discretion. His sister used to call me the stable one, which sounded like praise until I realized it meant they all expected me to absorb damage quietly, while Daniel was allowed to be complex. Whenever he withdrew, they explained it. He's stressed. He needs purpose. You know how men are when they feel overlooked. Overlooked. As if I had not built a life around holding everyone together. By the time TechStream moved into the downtown building I owned through Sentinel Holdings, I had already noticed other changes too. Daniel guarding his phone more carefully, staying later at work, becoming oddly defensive over simple questions. Are you coming home for dinner? I told you, I have meetings. With Vanessa? His jaw tightened. You really want to become this kind of wife? That sentence stayed with me. Not because it answered my question, because it told me what he feared more than betraying me, being confronted. Still, I said nothing. Not because I was blind, because I was watching. And because somewhere beneath the silence, beneath the coldness growing between us, beneath the social smiles and carefully managed distance, I still believed that whatever was happening had limits. I was wrong. The affair was only one fracture. The deeper wound had already started long before I picked up that badge from Vanessa's trembling hand. I just didn't know yet how much of my marriage, my work, and my children's future had been built on lies Daniel thought I would never uncover. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. Not the dramatic kind people imagine when they hear the word betrayal. No lipstick on collars, no mysterious hotel receipts left in pockets. Daniel was far too careful for that. The warning signs were quieter, subtle shifts in tone, changes in priorities, little cracks that only someone who had lived beside him for 26 years would recognize. At first, it was just TechStream dominating every conversation. Daniel talked about it constantly. Their revolutionary platform, their breakthrough architecture, their investors, their growth projections, their expansion plans. I listened politely at dinner, asking the occasional question the way a supportive spouse does. But something about the way he described their technology always made the back of my mind itch. Not suspicion. Recognition. The language sounded familiar. Too familiar. At first, I told myself that was natural. Technology companies often followed similar frameworks. Good systems tend to evolve along predictable paths. But the details Daniel mentioned sometimes matched DataCore's architecture almost perfectly. Database layering methods, API structures, load balancing logic, even terminology I had invented internally during DataCore's earliest years. The first time I noticed it clearly, we were sitting in the kitchen late one evening. Daniel was pacing, energized from a meeting. You should see the new backend model, he said. Vanessa says it's what makes our entire platform scalable. I looked up from my tea. What kind of architecture are they using? He shrugged casually. Layered modular system. Data abstraction across 3 tiers. Something like that. My stomach tightened slightly. That was almost exactly how DataCore had been structured. But again, I dismissed it. Coincidence happens. Innovation builds on previous ideas. And Daniel, of all people, had access to my work for years while we were married. He'd heard me talk about systems late at night. He'd sat beside me while I mapped infrastructure diagrams across our dining table. Maybe he simply understood the concepts better than I realized. Still, the discomfort stayed with me. And then there was Vanessa. She began appearing everywhere. Company photos, conference panels, industry interviews. Daniel talked about her more than any other colleague. She's the reason our messaging finally makes sense. She knows how to sell the vision. She understands the tech enough to translate it. That last sentence caught my attention. Vanessa Reed was a marketing executive. She shouldn't have understood back-end architecture deeply enough to translate it. But again, I stayed quiet. Because I had already learned that questioning Daniel about TechStream only made him defensive. You don't work in the field anymore, he snapped once when I pushed a little too hard. I built the field you're working in, I replied calmly. He didn't answer. Instead, he changed the subject. That was the first time I noticed something else, too. He had started treating my past as if it were finished, as if the company I built no longer mattered, as if my expertise had somehow expired. At first, that only hurt my pride. Later, I realized it was convenient for him, because the less relevant I seemed, the less likely anyone would connect TechStream's technology to DataCore. But the real turning point came 8 months before the party. That was when I accidentally discovered the email chain. It happened late one night while I was organizing old digital archives on a laptop I rarely used anymore. Daniel had borrowed it during a TechStream project months earlier. Most of the files were nothing important. Temporary downloads, meeting notes, draft presentations. Then I noticed a folder I didn't recognize. Inside were technical documents. My documents. Architecture frameworks from DataCore's original system designs. Database blueprints. Back-end methodology papers. Files that had never been released publicly. Files that had only existed inside my company. My heartbeat slowed, the way it does when the brain suddenly understands something the heart doesn't want to accept. The sender was Rachel Chin. Me. No, not me. The system had simply saved the contact name automatically. The actual sender was Daniel Chen's personal email account. The message was addressed to Vanessa Reed. Attached files. DataCore backend architecture documentation. The message itself was short. These might help your team understand how the original system worked. Could be useful as reference. Vanessa's reply arrived minutes later. This is incredible, exactly what we needed. Below that were several follow-up emails between them. Technical discussions, questions, clarifications. Each message made one thing clearer. Vanessa hadn't just received the documents. She had studied them carefully. I sat there staring at the screen for a long time. Not angry, not even shocked. Just still. Because suddenly the itch in the back of my mind over the past few years made sense. TechStream's breakthrough platform wasn't a coincidence. It was a reconstruction. Not copied line by line. That would have been too obvious. Instead, they had taken the architecture, the logic, the foundational structure of my system, then rebuilt it under a different name. A prettier interface, better branding, new investors, new leadership. But underneath it all, the bones were still mine, and Daniel had given them away, not to help the industry, not to collaborate, to help the woman he was sleeping with build a company. That night I didn't confront him. Not yet, because emotion makes people sloppy, and I had built an entire career on never being sloppy. Instead, I started collecting information. Commit logs, repository histories, technical comparisons between DataCore's architecture and TechStream's public platform releases, investor presentations, internal documentation leaks. Every piece of evidence went into a private folder on my encrypted desktop. 8 months of quiet work. 8 months of watching Daniel drift further away from me while he celebrated TechStream's success. 8 months of realizing something else, too. Daniel hadn't just betrayed our marriage. He had risked something far bigger. Because TechStream had raised $90 million from investors based on technology that legally belonged to me. Pension funds, private equity firms, startup accelerators, all of them betting on a platform built on stolen architecture, which meant the moment I enforced my intellectual property rights, the entire company could collapse. I didn't rush, I waited. Because timing matters. And sometimes the most powerful move is simply letting people believe they've won, until the moment they realize they've been standing on your foundation the entire time. The party that night wasn't supposed to be dramatic, just a celebration. An anniversary event for TechStream's headquarters, the building I owned, the company built on my architecture, the husband who believed I had faded into the background, and the woman who thought she understood the board she was playing on. Then my wallet hit the marble floor, and suddenly Vanessa Reed saw the name on my badge. That was when the silence began. The kind of silence that happens when someone realizes the game they've been playing was never theirs to begin with. The morning after the party, I woke up before sunrise. Old habits never leave you. Years of running DataCore had trained my body to wake early, long before emails started flooding in or meetings filled the calendar. The house was quiet, too quiet. Ryan was traveling for work in Chicago. Claire was still at Stanford finishing finals. Tyler was away at college in Boulder. The 5-bedroom house that once echoed with arguments about homework, music practice, and curfews now felt cavernous. Daniel's side of the bed was empty. The sheets were cold. I found him downstairs in the kitchen, already dressed, standing near the counter with his phone pressed tightly to his ear. "No, I don't know why she was there," he said quietly. "She almost never attends these things." He stopped talking the moment he saw me. His expression flickered, then smoothed into something neutral. "I'll call you back," he said quickly, before ending the call. No good morning, no greeting. Just tension hanging between us like fog. "Marcus wants a meeting," Daniel said. Marcus Reed, Vanessa's husband, the CEO of TechStream, the man currently building a multi-$100 million company on architecture that legally belonged to me. I poured coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch. "About what?" Daniel rubbed the back of his neck. "He didn't say, just that it involves you." That made me smile slightly. Of course it did. Marcus had seen the badge. Sentinel Holdings. Owner access. He had spent the entire night connecting dots that never occurred to him before. "You should ask Marcus," I said calmly. Daniel's eyes narrowed. "I'm asking you." I met his gaze over the rim of my coffee mug. "Daniel, when you gave Vanessa my data core architecture files 3 years ago," the color drained from his face instantly. "Did you really believe I would never find out?" He stared at me like the air had suddenly disappeared from the room. "I don't know what you're talking about." The lie came too fast, too clean. "You do," I said quietly. "The back-end frameworks, the database architecture, the API design documentation." I placed my phone on the counter and opened the email chain. His own message appeared on the screen. "These might help your team understand how the original system worked." Vanessa's reply beneath it. "This is incredible." Daniel stepped backward as if the phone might explode. "I was trying to help," he said. "Help?" I repeated softly. Marcus was struggling with their system architecture. I thought, "You thought handing 12 years of my work to your girlfriend would solve his problem?" The word hung in the air. "Girlfriend." Daniel flinched. "It wasn't like that." "Then what was it like?" He didn't answer. Instead, he looked at the floor. My voice stayed calm, which seemed to disturb him more than anger would have. "You gave him everything," I continued. "Frameworks, infrastructure models, data scaling architecture. They didn't copy the code directly. They were smarter than that." I tapped the screen. "They rebuilt the system around the same structure." He shook his head. "You're paranoid. I have commit histories, repository comparisons, internal TechStream documentation." His eyes widened slightly. "I've been collecting it for 8 months. Now he looked genuinely shaken. "That's impossible." "No," I said quietly. "It's thorough." Daniel ran a hand through his hair. "You walked away from the industry, Diana. You sold the company. What was I supposed to do? Stop living because you retired?" "Retired?" I echoed. "You didn't abandon a hobby, Daniel. You gave my life's work to someone who used it to raise $90 million from investors." His phone began vibrating again. "Marcus." Daniel stared at the screen but didn't answer. "TechStream built its entire platform on my architecture," I continued calmly. "Every major system function, every scaling protocol." "You're exaggerating." "I'm being precise." The phone kept buzzing. Marcus again. Finally, Daniel answered and stepped into the next room. I could still hear his voice. At first defensive, then confused, then frightened. When he returned a minute later, his hand was shaking. "Marcus is being sued," he said quietly. I rinsed my coffee cup in the sink. "Yes." "An intellectual property firm out of Delaware filed this morning." "Yes." "Patent infringement, stolen architecture, licensing violations." I dried my hands slowly. "The firm represents Sentinel Holdings." Daniel looked at me like he was seeing a stranger. "You did this." "I did." "You're going to destroy TechStream." "No," I corrected. "They destroyed themselves." He paced across the kitchen. "You can't do this, Diana." "I already did." Daniel turned sharply toward me. "Our son works there." That stopped me for a moment. Ryan, 25 years old, brilliant strategist. He had climbed from analyst to senior strategist in only 2 years. He loved his job, loved the company, loved the future he believed he was building. If TechStream collapses, Daniel continued, Ryan loses everything. I leaned against the counter, suddenly tired. Ryan is intelligent, I said quietly. He'll land on his feet. Daniel stepped closer. Not if his own mother destroys the company he works for. The words sat between us. Not angry, just heavy. For the first time that morning, doubt flickered somewhere deep inside me. Because Daniel wasn't entirely wrong. TechStream wasn't just Marcus's company anymore. It was Ryan's career, Claire's potential investment, our children's future. But none of that changed the truth. Daniel had betrayed me. Vanessa had helped build a company on stolen architecture. Marcus had raised millions on technology that legally belonged to me. And now the consequences were finally arriving. Daniel's voice softened. Diana, please, think about what this will do to our family. I looked at him carefully, the man I had married 26 years earlier, the man who once stayed up all night beside me while I wrote the first version of DataCore's system architecture. Somewhere along the way, he had stopped being my partner and started being someone else entirely. I am thinking about our family, I said quietly. I'm thinking about what you did to it. The room went silent, and somewhere across the city, TechStream's executives were opening legal documents that would begin unraveling everything they had built. Ryan called at noon. I was in my study reviewing legal documents when his name flashed across my phone screen. For a moment, I considered letting it go to voicemail, but I knew my son well enough to understand something. If Ryan Chen was calling in the middle of a workday, it meant the situation inside TechStream had already exploded. I answered. Hi, Ryan. There was a pause on the other end. Not silence, breathing. Tight, controlled. Mom, he finally said, we need to talk. His tone was professional, not emotional. The same voice he used when presenting strategy reports to executives. It made the conversation feel less like a family call and more like a boardroom confrontation. I figured we might, I replied. You read the lawsuit filing? Yes. Then you know your name appears 17 times. I leaned back in my chair. That sounds accurate. Ryan exhaled slowly. Please tell me you're not doing what everyone here thinks you're doing. What do they think I'm doing? Destroying TechStream. His voice sharpened. Because Mom works here. I closed my eyes briefly. This isn't about your father. Then what is it about? He asked. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you're blowing up the company I've spent 2 years building my career in. It's about intellectual property theft. Ryan didn't answer immediately. When he finally spoke, his voice was quieter. What do you mean? I explained everything. The emails, the architecture documents Daniel had sent to Vanessa, the structural similarities between TechStream's platform and DataCore's back-end systems, the 8 months I had spent gathering evidence. Ryan listened without interrupting. When I finished, the line stayed silent for several seconds. Then he asked one question. How long have you known? 8 months. Another pause. And you didn't tell me. Would you have believed me? Ryan sighed. I don't know. His voice softened slightly. Marcus has been good to me. He promoted me twice. He listens when I pitch strategy ideas. He built this company from nothing. No, I said quietly. He built it on something. Mom. He built it on architecture I created. Ryan's frustration surfaced again. Mom, tech companies iterate on existing systems all the time. That's not theft, that's innovation. Not when the entire framework is copied. He exhaled sharply. So what exactly do you want to happen? Justice. That's not an answer. It's the only one that matters. Ryan's voice hardened. You know what it looks like from here? I waited. It looks like you're destroying my career to prove a point to Dad. That one hurt more than I expected. This isn't about control, isn't it? His words came faster now. You sold your company. You stepped away. Dad found something new, a company that actually values him. Ryan. And now suddenly you show up and burn the whole thing down. The accusation landed hard. You think I'm jealous? I asked quietly. I think you can't stand that Dad built something without you. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Not because I didn't have an answer, because the answer wouldn't reach him. Ryan had spent 2 years inside TechStream. The company had become part of his identity. His promotions, his friendships, his future plans, all tied to the same structure I was now threatening to dismantle. "Ryan," I said carefully, "I'm not trying to hurt you, but you are." His voice dropped to something colder. "I worked 18-hour days for that promotion. I earned it." And Marcus earned his company by stealing architecture. "No," Ryan snapped, "you're taking it away." I rubbed my temple slowly. "Marcus took it away when he committed fraud." "No." Ryan's tone changed again, quieter now, but more cutting. "You're taking it away because you can't stand that Dad moved on." That sentence stayed in the air between us. It was the first time my own child had spoken to me like an opponent. "Ryan," I said quietly, "I have another call coming in." That wasn't true. "But Marcus is calling an emergency meeting," Ryan said. "I need to be there." "Of course you do." There was another pause. Then Ryan spoke again, more softly. "Mom, please think about what you're doing." Before I could answer, the line went dead. I sat in my chair for a long time afterward, staring at the silent phone in my hand. But inside my chest, something had shifted. For months, I had viewed this conflict as a legal matter. Intellectual property, corporate fraud, evidence, justice. But Ryan's call forced me to confront something harder. My decision wouldn't just destroy Marcus Reed. It could destroy my son's future too. And for the first time since I filed the lawsuit, I wasn't entirely sure where the line between justice and collateral damage actually lay. Outside the window, rain began falling against the glass, soft then heavier. Somewhere downtown, inside a glass conference room filled with anxious executives, my lawsuit was probably already spreading through text stream like fire. And somewhere in that room, Ryan Chen was trying to defend a company built on the very architecture his mother had created. I leaned back and closed my eyes because the real fight hadn't even begun yet. And the next call was going to make everything even worse. 3 days later, Claire called. If Ryan was the ambitious one, the strategist who thrived inside corporate battles, Claire had always been different, analytical, calm. The child who inherited my patience and Daniel's ability to read people, which meant when she called, I already knew she had studied the situation carefully. "Hi, Mom," she said. Her voice was steady, but I could hear tension beneath it. "Ryan told you," I said. "Yes. And your father. And half of TechStream, apparently," she replied dryly. I almost smiled. Claire didn't rush into accusations like Ryan had. Instead, she asked the question she always asked first. "Can you explain exactly what's happening?" So I did. The stolen architecture, Daniel sending the documents, Vanessa helping Marcus rebuild the system, the investors who had poured $90 million into a company built on intellectual property that wasn't legally theirs. Claire listened the entire time without interrupting. When I finished, she spoke quietly. "Okay." That single word surprised me. "Okay," I repeated. "Yes," she said. "So Dad made a massive mistake, and Marcus built a company on technology he didn't own." "That's correct. But there's something you need to know." Her tone shifted slightly. "What?" I asked. Claire inhaled slowly. "I invested in TechStream last year." My stomach tightened. "How much?" $50,000. I closed my eyes. Claire's trust fund had been carefully structured when she was younger. That money was supposed to support her transition into adulthood after finishing business school. "Mom," she said softly, "I didn't know it was built on your architecture." "I know." "Dad told me it was a promising startup," she continued. "Marcus showed us financial projections. I did due diligence. The technology looked solid." "Because it was." There was a pause. "My technology." Claire exhaled. "Mom, if TechStream collapses because of the lawsuit, I lose everything." That sentence hit differently than Ryan's anger. Ryan feared losing his job. Claire feared losing her safety net, but she wasn't finished. "There's more," she said. Of course there was. "I've been analyzing TechStream's financial reports for one of my MBA projects." Paper rustled on her end of the line. "The company's valuation is currently projected at $450 million. That sounds optimistic. It is, Claire said, unless the platform actually works. It did. Because the platform was built on architecture I had spent 12 years perfecting. Marcus isn't just using your work, Claire continued. He's building the company's entire future on it. How much did they raise in the last round? $90 million. The number sat heavily in my chest. $90 million from who? I asked. 3 venture capital firms, several family offices, and 2 pension funds. Investors who believed they were backing original technology. They'll lose everything if the company collapses, Claire said quietly. People who invested in a fraud. People who didn't know it was a fraud, she replied. Her voice hardened slightly. Including your daughter. I stood and walked to the window. The rain from earlier had turned the sky gray over the city. What would you have me do? I asked. Make them pay for it. I am. No, Claire said firmly. You're burning it down. I didn't answer. There's another option, she continued. Negotiate. For what? A licensing agreement. She spoke quickly now, clearly having rehearsed the idea. You take a revenue percentage. You take equity. You take a board seat. You force Marcus to admit the technology came from you, and let the company continue. Yes, that rewards theft. No, Claire said. It forces them to pay for what they stole. I rubbed my temple slowly. That still leaves the issue of your father. Her voice softened slightly. I know Dad messed up. Messed up? I repeated. He betrayed you, she admitted. There's no way around that. Silence hung between us for a moment. Then Claire said something that stopped me cold. Ryan's getting married. What? He proposed 2 weeks ago. To who? Jennifer. The name sounded familiar. TechStream's marketing director, Claire explained. They met at work. Of course they did. The wedding's next summer. My mind was racing now. Ryan hadn't told me. He didn't tell you because he knew you'd react exactly like this, Claire said quietly. Closed off, making decisions without considering how they affect anyone else. That's not fair, isn't it? Her words were calm but cutting. You've been planning this for 8 months, Mom. 8 months, and you never talked to us, never warned us. I was protecting you. No, she said softly. You were protecting your plan. The silence stretched between us. Finally, she spoke again. Tyler called me this morning, my youngest child, 21. Still in college. What did he say? I asked. He's flying home tomorrow. Why? Claire's voice cracked slightly. Because our family is imploding and he thinks someone needs to stop it. I exhaled slowly. We're all coming home, she said. All 3 of us. Ryan. Claire. Tyler. We're going to sit down and figure this out together. Her tone turned firm. With or without you. Then the call ended. I stood there staring at the city skyline for a long time. Marcus was scrambling. Daniel was panicking. Investors were starting to ask questions, but the real pressure wasn't coming from them anymore. It was coming from my children, and they were about to walk through the front door of the house that had once held our entire family together, to confront the woman who might destroy all of their futures in the name of justice. They all arrived the next evening. I heard the front door open while I was still in my study upstairs. Voices filled the foyer. Ryan's deep, controlled tone, Claire's calmer one layered over it, Tyler's louder and more emotional. Daniel's voice moved between them, trying to smooth things over the way he always had when tensions rose. For a moment, I just sat there, staring at the legal documents spread across my desk. 8 months of evidence, 8 months of certainty, and suddenly, none of it felt simple anymore. A knock didn't come. The door opened. Tyler walked in first. My youngest had always been the most emotionally transparent of the 3. Ryan hid behind professionalism, Claire behind logic. Tyler felt everything and never bothered pretending otherwise. He looked older than when I'd last seen him. Not physically, emotionally. Mom, he said. Tyler. I stood to hug him, but he raised a hand gently. I'm not here for a hug. The words weren't cruel, just honest. I'm here because my mother is about to destroy our family, and someone needs to tell her she's being stubborn. I exhaled slowly. That's direct. He shrugged and dropped into the chair across from my desk. I learned from you. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then Tyler leaned forward. Claire told me everything. The stolen architecture, Dad's emails, Marcus building TechStream on your work. You understand why I filed the lawsuit then. I understand why you're angry, he said. But I don't understand why you're willing to take a sledgehammer to everyone around you. I stayed silent. Ryan's engaged, Tyler continued. I know. To Jennifer, he said, the marketing director at TechStream. Yes. They met at the company Christmas party 2 years ago. His voice softened slightly. They're good together, Mom. I knew that. Ryan had sounded happier the last 2 years than he had in a long time. If TechStream collapses, Tyler continued, Ryan doesn't just lose his job. He loses the place where their entire relationship started. I felt something twist inside my chest. Tyler kept going. You've been planning this for 8 months. Yes. 8 months, Mom. His voice sharpened slightly. You had time to tell us. Time to warn us so Claire wouldn't invest. Time to let Ryan think about other career options. I didn't answer. You decided we were collateral damage. I was protecting you from knowing your father betrayed me. No, Tyler said quietly. You were protecting your pride. The words hit harder than I expected. Your father didn't just cheat, I said calmly. He gave away 12 years of my work. I know, Tyler replied. And Mom, that's horrible. He paused. But instead of handling it like a family, his eyes met mine. You went nuclear. The door opened behind him. Claire stepped in first, carrying her laptop. Ryan followed. He looked exhausted. None of them sat. Claire spoke first. We're having a family meeting. Her voice wasn't asking. It was announcing. We moved downstairs to the living room. Daniel was already there, standing near the window with his arms crossed. For the first time in years, he looked unsure of himself. Claire placed her laptop on the coffee table and opened a presentation. Charts filled the screen. Numbers. Graphs. Evidence. I've spent the last 3 days analyzing TechStream's financial structure, she said. Investments, investor agreements, code repositories, valuation projections. She clicked to the next slide. The company is valued at $450 million on paper, Ryan added quietly. But 90% of that value depends on the back-end architecture. Claire looked at me. Your architecture. I nodded once. If the IP claim succeeds and the company loses access to that architecture, Claire continued, the valuation collapses to roughly $40 million. Another slide appeared. That means investors lose roughly 90% of their capital. That isn't my problem, I said. Ryan stepped forward. It becomes your problem when they sue you. My eyes shifted to him. They can't. Yes, they can. He opened a folder and spread legal papers across the table. I've been speaking with TechStream's legal team. That sentence alone stung more than I expected. If the IP holder knowingly allowed the company to raise funds for months without enforcing the claim, Ryan continued, investors could argue you enabled the fraud. I felt something cold settle in my stomach. You're saying I could be liable? Yes. Ryan's voice softened slightly. I'm not threatening you, Mom. I'm trying to protect you. The room was silent. Then Ryan said something that hurt more than any legal risk. Jennifer and I are getting married next June. I looked up slowly. I want you there. He held my gaze. But if you destroy the company where we built our careers, I don't know if I can invite you. The words hit like a physical blow. Tyler spoke next. Claire invested $50,000. That's her entire safety net. Claire closed the laptop gently. Mom, I'm not asking you to forgive Marcus. Or Dad. Her voice trembled slightly. I'm asking you not to burn everything down, to punish them. Finally, Daniel spoke. Quietly. I know I betrayed you. All 4 of them turned toward him. I was selfish, he said. I wanted to feel important again. Vanessa made that easy. His eyes met mine. But destroying TechStream won't undo what I did. No, I said softly. It won't. The room fell into silence. For the first time since I filed the lawsuit, I wasn't thinking about Marcus, or Daniel, or Vanessa. I was thinking about my children, Ryan's wedding, Claire's investment, Tyler's future, and the possibility that the fight I believed was about justice might cost me the only things that actually mattered. That night, I sat alone in my study long after everyone had gone to bed. The legal documents were still spread across my desk. Evidence of fraud, evidence of betrayal, evidence of theft. And for the first time in 8 months, I wasn't sure whether winning would actually feel like victory. I didn't sleep that night. The house was silent, but my mind kept replaying the same images over and over. Ryan standing in the living room, telling me he might not want me at his wedding. Claire quietly explaining that her entire financial safety net could disappear. Tyler accusing me of protecting my pride instead of my family. For 8 months, I had believed I was fighting a clear battle. Marcus Reed had built a company on stolen intellectual property. Daniel had betrayed both my marriage and my work. Justice seemed simple, but somewhere between the evidence folders on my desk and the exhausted expressions on my children's faces, something had changed. By 3 a.m, the rain outside had stopped. The city was quiet. I sat in the dark study, staring at the glowing screen of my laptop. Every document was there. The email chain, the architecture comparisons, the licensing agreements Marcus had violated. The case was airtight. If I pushed forward aggressively, TechStream would collapse within months. Marcus would be ruined. Daniel's reputation would be destroyed, and $90 million in investor capital would evaporate overnight. The law would be on my side, but the consequences would spread far beyond the courtroom. Ryan's career, Claire's investment, even Jennifer's future with my son, all of it tied to the same company. Justice suddenly felt heavier than I expected. Around 5 a.m, I finally picked up my phone. I dialed my attorney. He answered immediately. "Mrs. Chen? I need to make a change," I said quietly. There was a pause. "What kind of change?" "I'm willing to negotiate." My lawyer sounded surprised. "Marcus Reed's team already requested a meeting." "I know." "Do you want to settle?" "No." I leaned back in the chair. "I want control." Another pause. "That's different." "Marcus built his company on my architecture," I said. "That means the foundation legally belongs to me." "You're thinking acquisition through IP leverage." "Exactly." My lawyer let out a low whistle. "That would be devastating for Marcus." "Yes, but the company survives." I closed my eyes, and so do the people inside it. By mid-morning, Marcus's attorney had already requested a meeting. Neutral ground. A law firm downtown. Daniel insisted on coming. I didn't stop him. When we arrived, Marcus was already there. He looked terrible. Dark circles under his eyes, suit wrinkled. The confidence I had seen at countless industry events was gone. In its place was something else. Fear. His lawyer, Patricia Qley, sat beside him with a stack of documents thick enough to fill a briefcase. Vanessa, sat across the table, her posture stiff. For the first time since I had met her, she avoided my eyes. Patricia spoke first. "Thank you for coming, Mrs. Chen." "I'm not here for pleasantries," I replied. Marcus cleared his throat. "Diana, I want to apologize." That surprised me. "When Daniel sent Vanessa those files," he continued, "I didn't realize how proprietary they were. You knew exactly what they were." "I knew they were technical documentation." "You replied, 'This is gold.'" He flinched slightly. Poor choice of words. Accurate ones. Patricia leaned forward. "My client is prepared to offer a licensing agreement." She slid a paper across the table. $15 million in compensation, 3% equity, and a board seat. I glanced at the number once before pushing the paper back. "That's what you think my work is worth?" "It's an opening proposal," she said smoothly. "Here's my counteroffer." I leaned forward. "You transfer full ownership of TechStream to me." Marcus's face went white. "That's impossible." "Is it?" "You're asking me to give up my company. You built it on my architecture." Patricia intervened again. "Perhaps we could explore a hybrid structure." I raised a hand. "Marcus steps down as CEO." The room fell silent. "I take controlling ownership," I continued calmly. "TechStream continues operating under new leadership." Marcus stared at me. "And what happens to me?" "You leave." The word hung in the air. Vanessa finally spoke. "You're destroying everything we built." I looked at her evenly. "You destroyed it the moment you helped steal my work." Marcus leaned back slowly in his chair. What about the employees? He asked. They keep their jobs. And the investors? They keep their company. And Daniel? That question came from Vanessa. My husband sat beside me, silent. He made his choices, I said quietly. Marcus studied me for a long moment. Then he spoke again. There's one condition I need. I waited. Techstream survives. It will. Ryan keeps his position. I nodded once. Ryan earned his job. Marcus looked down at the documents in front of him. The room was quiet except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. Finally, he exhaled. If I sign this, you walk away with your reputation damaged but intact. And if I don't, you lose everything in court. Patricia leaned toward him and whispered something. Marcus listened, then slowly nodded. He picked up the pen. Before signing, he looked directly at me. I never intended to steal from you, he said quietly. You just didn't think I would notice. He signed. Just like that, Techstream changed owners. The company survived. Marcus Reed lost everything, and for the first time in months, the war I had started finally reached its turning point. But victory still didn't feel the way I expected, because the next decision I made would determine something far more important than the fate of a technology company. It would determine whether my family survived the fallout. Marcus signed every page. The sound of the pen moving across the paper was quiet, but in that room, it felt louder than anything else. Each signature transferred a piece of Techstream away from him. Control, equity, authority. By the time he finished the final document, the company he had spent 5 years building legally belonged to me. Marcus placed the pen down slowly. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Patricia gathered the papers, checking each signature with careful precision. Everything appears to be in order, she said. Marcus leaned back in his chair, staring at the ceiling, as if trying to process what had just happened. I guess this is the part where I say congratulations, he muttered. I didn't respond, because this had never been about celebration. It was about correction. Marcus finally stood. His shoulders looked smaller now, as if the weight of the company had been physically holding him upright. You're going to run it yourself? He asked. Yes. He nodded once. You'll do better than I did. Vanessa stood beside him. Her expression had changed too. The confidence, the sharp marketing polish, the careful charm she used in every meeting. It was gone. What happens to me? She asked quietly. You resign, I replied. Her head snapped up. I built half of that company. You helped build it using stolen architecture. That's not fair. It's accurate. Daniel finally spoke for the first time during the entire meeting. Diana, maybe there's another arrangement. I looked at him. For a brief moment, I saw the man I had married 26 years earlier. Then I remembered the email he had sent. These might help your team. No, I said calmly. Vanessa's voice sharpened. So you're just throwing me out? You gave Marcus the foundation for fraud. You walked away from the industry, and you walked into intellectual property theft. The room went silent again. Marcus rubbed his face. It's done, he said quietly. Vanessa turned toward him. You're just accepting this? What choice do we have? Marcus looked exhausted. If we fight this in court, we lose everything. Vanessa's shoulders slumped. For the first time since I had met her, she looked uncertain. Patricia finished organizing the documents and slid them into a leather folder. Once these are filed, she said, the transition becomes official. Marcus nodded slowly. Then he turned toward me. My team deserves stability, he said. They will have it. And Ryan? I met his gaze. My son keeps his position. Marcus's expression shifted. Your son? Ryan Chen. Realization crossed his face. He never told me. He didn't have to. Marcus shook his head slowly. That explains a lot. He walked toward the door. Before leaving, he paused. For what it's worth, Ryan is one of the best strategists we have. I know. Marcus nodded once and left. Vanessa followed him without another word. The room grew quiet. Daniel stood beside the window, staring out at the skyline. What happens now? He asked softly. Now Techstream survives, I said. And our marriage? The question hung heavily between us. 26 years of shared life condensed into one fragile sentence. I thought about everything. The early days of datacore, the nights we stayed awake planning our future, the years raising 3 children together, and the moment I discovered the email that proved he had given away my life's work. 26 years is a long time, I said quietly. Daniel nodded. Yes, we had many good years. Yes, but somewhere along the way, I continued, you stopped being my partner. He didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. He simply lowered his eyes. I made a mistake, he said. It wasn't one mistake. He looked up slowly. What are you saying? I'm saying this marriage is over. The words felt calmer than I expected. No shouting. No anger. Just truth. Daniel closed his eyes briefly. I understand. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then he asked the question that mattered most. What about the kids? They'll still have both parents. He nodded slowly. And us? We moved forward separately. Daniel took a long breath. Then he did something I didn't expect. He smiled faintly. Not happily, just with quiet acceptance. You always were the strongest person I knew. I didn't answer, because strength sometimes feels exactly like loss. Daniel walked toward the door. Before leaving, he stopped beside me. I hope someday you forgive me. I looked at him carefully. I hope someday you forgive yourself. Then he left. The door closed softly behind him. Patricia gathered her papers. You'll need to address the employees tomorrow, she said. Announce the ownership change. I will. She studied me for a moment. You made the right decision. Then why does it feel like I lost? She gave a small, understanding smile. Because you're a mother before you're a businesswoman. And for the first time since this entire conflict began, I realized she might be right. TechStream survived. Marcus lost his company. Vanessa lost her career. Daniel lost our marriage. But the real aftermath wasn't measured in contracts or lawsuits. It was measured in the quiet space waiting for me at home, and the question of whether my children would still see me as the woman who protected them, or the one who nearly destroyed everything they loved. 3 months later, TechStream was running better than it ever had before. That was the strange irony of everything. Once the chaos settled, once the ownership transfer was complete and the lawsuits withdrawn, the company finally had something it had never truly possessed before, a legitimate foundation. I restructured the engineering teams first. The original architecture, my architecture, was finally documented properly and expanded instead of awkwardly patched over. The engineers who had been quietly struggling to make Marcus's shortcuts work suddenly had clarity. Within weeks, the platform was more stable than it had ever been. Within 2 months, our largest investors stopped panicking and started scheduling meetings again. By the 3rd month, TechStream's valuation had stabilized. Not $450 million like Marcus once promised, but real, honest, and sustainable. Ryan stayed. At first, our conversations were tense and careful, like 2 professionals negotiating territory instead of a mother and son rebuilding trust. But slowly, things softened. One evening, after a board meeting, he lingered in my office doorway. You didn't fire anyone, he said. I told you I wouldn't. You also didn't dismantle the company. Ryan nodded slowly. I didn't believe you. I know. He hesitated. Then he stepped forward and hugged me. Quick. Awkward, but real. Jennifer and I still want you at the wedding, he said quietly. I felt something loosen in my chest for the first time in months. Claire's investment also survived. In fact, the equity she held, transferred legally after the restructuring, was now worth more than double her original $50,000. She pretended to be calm about it, but when we met for lunch in San Francisco, she laughed and said, well, I guess betting on my mother's architecture turned out to be a pretty good investment. Tyler finished the semester at Boulder and came home for Thanksgiving. He walked into the kitchen, hugged me tightly, and whispered, I'm glad you didn't burn everything down. So was I. Daniel and I finalized the divorce 2 weeks after the ownership transfer. 26 years of marriage ended quietly. No courtroom battles, no public drama, just signatures and lawyers shaking hands. He moved into a condo downtown. We spoke occasionally, mostly about the children. There was sadness there, of course, but also acceptance. Some relationships don't end because love disappears. They end because trust does. And trust, once broken deeply enough, rarely grows back the same way. Life slowly rearranged itself. Ryan focused on the wedding. Claire started her new job. Tyler returned to college. TechStream grew into the company it should have been from the beginning. And I learned something unexpected. Winning a battle doesn't always feel like victory. Sometimes it feels like rebuilding after a fire you never wanted to start. The real turning point came 8 months later. Ryan's wedding took place at a vineyard outside Seattle. The ceremony was simple, beautiful. Jennifer walked down the aisle, smiling in a way that made Ryan forget every other person in the room. Daniel sat several rows behind me. We exchanged polite nods before the ceremony began. No anger, just distance. Claire sat beside me, Tyler on my other side. For the first time in a long while, all 3 of my children were together again. When Ryan said his vows, his voice trembled slightly, not from fear, from happiness. And as I watched him promise to build a life with someone he loved, I realized something quietly powerful. Families don't survive because everything goes right. They survive because when everything goes wrong, people decide to rebuild instead of walking away. After the reception, Ryan found me near the vineyard fence. His tie was loose, jacket gone, his face glowing with the kind of joy that only comes from beginning a new life. "Mom," he said. "Yes?" He smiled. "Do you think our family will ever be normal again?" I laughed softly. "Ryan, normal families don't exist." He grinned. "Fair point." Then he hugged me again, longer this time. And as I drove home that night, alone on the quiet highway, I thought about everything that had happened. The party where my badge fell to the floor. The betrayal. The lawsuit. The confrontation with my children. The choice between justice and destruction. In the end, the lesson wasn't about revenge, or business, or even winning. It was about something far simpler. A foundation matters. In companies, in technology, and in families. If the foundation is built on lies, everything eventually collapses. But if you have the courage to rebuild it honestly, sometimes the structure that rises afterward is stronger than anything that stood there before. And sometimes the most powerful thing a person can do is not destroy what betrayed them, but rebuild it into something better.